Welcome to the Called by God podcast with Rotten Sanat, Adney Godin, and myself, Nixon Sylvain. This show is about dialogues of biblical characters and testimonies of Christians who submitted to the will of God. Each week, we'll bring on one guest so that they can share their story of how they were called by God. I hope this show inspires you. Enjoy. Hello, world. Welcome to another episode called by God. It is going to be a blessed episode. You guys are in for a special treat. I am your host, Nixon Sylvain, and my other host,
Rotten Sanat.
And my co-host,
Adney Godin.
Adney Godin, she was so quick to jump to the mic. Look at her. She was just so excited to share with the world. Like, I'm the co-host. But we do have a special treat. I mean, this woman right here, she's a powerful woman of God. And she's a dear friend of mine. I've known this woman for like over 15 years. So that right there to tell you that we have some track record. And I have known this woman for loving God and desiring a relationship with Jesus Christ. This woman is a God-fearing woman. The Bible even records favor is deceitful, beauty is vain, but a woman that fears the Lord, she shall be praised. So you guys going to hear a powerful testimony from this woman of God. And she's a smart woman, clever and intelligent. So I hope you guys are buckle your seats for a roller coaster ride. Without further ado, I introduce to you Katia Prince. Katia Prince, how are you doing?
I am doing fantastic. Thank you for that lovely introduction.
Oh, anytime. Okay, host and co-host. You know, we're here in a coffee shop, not in a physical coffee shop, but that's the kind of like feel that we want everybody to have once they come in into our show. So we're going to just dive in, because we know you have a mouthful of testimonies that you want to share with the world. So my question on to you, I want to ask, what was your childhood like, as it pertains to being called by God, because I really want you to share, because we're trying to bridge a gap of where you came from, because we know you've been in the body of Christ for some years now. So we want to know, what was your childhood like coming up?
So I was not raised in the body of Christ. Like most migrants, I went to Catholic school, and so you're taught certain basics, about who God is, about Jesus, and for the most part, it's superficial. You don't really go deep into the layers, of the Bible and what one needs to know. Basically, what you need to be fearing is taught to you, verbally, and so I had my first communion, of course, excited about that, but it was just more so about wearing the pretty dress and, getting my hair curled for the first time. I went through confirmation, and yet I can't even tell you at this point what that meant, or how it any way connected to me being a child of God. And so it was more so going through the motions. I went through Catholic school, for the first, 12 years of life. But aside from, reciting prayers that were just taught to us, that were just basically repetitive in nature, I didn't know what talking to God was about. I just kind of did what I was told. And that was the gist of really growing up, in the church for me. Once I migrated here to the States, things got very different, of course. I didn't move over with my family for the most part. My dad remained in the island. So the family members that I moved in with, they weren't Catholic. I'm not quite sure what form of religion they practiced, but I can't truly recall ever having even gone to church with my aunt, whom I lived with when I first got to the States at 12. I only remember one occasion when we went to church, and I think that's because I was the godmother to one of her sons, and that's the only time I remember going to church. So that was non-existent. When I moved in with my uncle on Miami Beach, again, never, not once, do I remember ever going to church. Somehow, of course, I had that knowledge of God. And I thought, hey, I was good. I was baptized when I was a baby. And so, I'm covered. I'm saved. So everything seems to be okay. I didn't understand that I needed to have this ongoing relationship with God. And so I just lived my life. Not going to church wasn't a big thing. And from the times I would go, whether it was like on a special occasion, again, it didn't mean much of anything. At some point in my teenage years, I transitioned into the care of the state. And so I was living in a foster home, going through group homes. And again, there wasn't, much, God or Christianity involved. My last foster home probably is the one where my foster mom, took us to church, a Baptist church, I remember, and that was very different from what I was accustomed to in terms of the reverence. Catholic teachings are a little bit different. Everything is done with a certain, reverence and silence. And it seems as if that's how you were to approach God, to honor God. And so it was very different from what I knew. It didn't quite appeal to me. But, she took me there, from time to time we would go as a family. So it was something. But I truly, had no knowledge of God, for those first, 18, 19, 20, almost 30 years of my life. Because by the time I end up being in the body, I had to have been about 31 or 30, about 31 years old.
So, Sister Prince, let's go back. I want to go back to when you was younger. So, while you mentioned you were going to church, going to religious institutions. So, what I want to know was like, were anyone in the house, did you have like Bible studies or did you have prayer within the house? Because one thing to go to church, but it's one thing to also take whatever you learn and bring that same practice in your own physical domain. So I want to know, were some of those practices being taken place in the home, if even not by a family member or a friend or uncle, or was it even done by you?
No, there were no Bible studies, whatsoever. As I mentioned, with going to Catholic school, we only went to church on Sundays. And that was just me. And that was with my school for the most part, because we were required to go to school. For the Catholic school that I went to, that was a requirement. So I don't even remember being at church with family. There were definitely no Bible study. My grandmother, she was always in her Bible, always would, throw out a scripture here and there, always seemed to be studying, but she never sat with me, to teach me anything of substance. So no, definitely no Bible studies, none of that. It was just the 1 hour on Sunday. And that was pretty much it.
Yeah. So what I want to do, so I want to go back because it's the reason why I want to go back to when you were young. It's the reason why I'm going back there because I want our listeners to really understand that God calls them, at an early age. There's some people that see the signs or some people that ignores the signs or even the calling. Like for me, for instance, I know how it feels about going with the motions of things. You mentioned how you were in a Catholic school. That was me. I didn't go to no Catholic school, but my parents was from a Catholic origin. And it was like, okay, we'll go to this Catholic church. So we was like confused. We was Catholic and Baptist. Okay. So we were, I don't want to say the word, but we were a mixed breed of religions. So I know how to go with the motions of things, but I want to know throughout your course of going to those Catholic schools, like, did you feel like there was something special about you, like this calling? Because at an early age, I felt that. So even though that my parents had this mixed religion, I felt that there was something special inside of me. I knew that it was more than just going to like a physical building or a so-called religion. I want to know at a young age, when did you have that feeling like there's something special about me or there's a calling on my life? Please explain to our listeners.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Thank you for making it midway through this episode. We want to take a moment to sincerely thank each and every one of you who have been supporting our show. Your encouragement and positive feedback mean the world to us. We want to continue to bring you inspiring and thought-provoking content each week, and that's where we need your help. We kindly ask you to support our podcast by clicking on the link provided in the description below. Your support will enable us to grow, reach a wider audience, and continue to produce the quality content you enjoy. We truly appreciate your support and value your contribution to the Call by God podcast. Together, let's inspire and uplift others in their faith journey. Thank you once again for your continued support, and we look forward to bringing you more enlightening episodes in the future. God bless.
Absolutely. You brought to memory some things I actually forgot to mention as it pertains to religion while growing up. I remember when I was, in catechism, Catholic school, you take these courses and, they will kind of take you through the knowledge. I just knew something deep inside of me told me that this was not it. I rebelled. I always did. I had to go confess. And I remember I never wanted to go and confess to the priest because I'm like, all he's going to tell me is to go recite a few Hail Marys. And it didn't feel right. I had to confess for my first communion, but I remember I always rebelled against it. It was probably my first, I almost want to say only confession. If I recall, maybe there probably was 2 or 3 more, but I was never that person because I just knew something about it just wasn't right. And so I asked myself, why did I feel that way? Everybody was kind of going with the program and yet I wasn't. And so I prayed about it, but at the time I was too young to even get the answers that I was looking for. I just knew that this wasn't it for certain. I knew that. And that feeling, ultimately, as we, share my story a little bit more, it'll come back. And that's what, put me on that search to find God, because I knew that what I had growing up wasn't it. At one point in time, I remember my aunts, they were studying with the Mormons. The Mormons used to do a lot of missionary work in the islands. And so my aunts, they were going to this Mormon church. By this time, I probably was, I want to say about 10 years old. Maybe 11, and could have been younger, but I know it was somewhere between 8 and 10. But nonetheless, with the Mormons, they had this thing, about whoever their founding prophet was, John Smith of some sort, who had a testimony, and everything surrounding it was about testimony. How God somehow shows and has this. Has this conversation with you, and you have your testimony from that conversation. And so as a child, I was like, I wanted it so bad. I never remember wanting anything more. I prayed for it. And I'm like, I want to have the testimony too, because you couldn't get baptized until you had the testimony. And I wanted it. I wanted it more than life itself, because I'm like, that's how I'm going to connect with God, and I'm going to get all the things that I want, because now I'll be able to talk to God. And of course, that's the mind of a child, but it was just so deep inside of me. So I would go every night and I would pray and I would pray and I would pray that I would have this, this relationship, this conversation like Moses did with God, and I would have my testimony. So of course I watch my aunts, one after one, they'd go up there and they'll give their testimony. And somebody else, would go up there, they'd give their testimony. And I remember I had a stepsister at the time. She even went and she gave her testimony. So everyone in the house had gone and given their testimony except for me. And of course, my father had nothing to do with any of that. He was, working. But nonetheless, they all had this testimony, but I didn't. And so I knew something was wrong. So I prayed that one night. I don't know if it was like the last night for people to have their testimony, but I remember this one night I prayed deeply. Nothing happened. And the next day I went and I told them, this is a fake This is not real. I said, because I prayed my hardest. I said, no one came to me to give me any testimony. I said, this religion, whatever it is. And at 9 years old, I remember saying that. As I said, I was a little rebel, but I knew, I'm like, God didn't connect with me like you guys say that he connected with you all. And you have this testimony. And I know I did this with the purest of heart. And it didn't happen for me. It's all a lie. It's fake. It's made up. So at that time, I knew that there was a reason. There was something for me. I didn't know what it was, but I knew the fact that I kept challenging the different religions that I came across at such a young age. And because I poured my whole heart and soul into it, like when you're begging Santa Claus for that one gift and you would give everything to have it, and it didn't happen for me. And I knew, okay, something is calling me in some way, shape, or form. I didn't understand it. I couldn't put my finger on it. But I knew there was something special about me. At some point in time, I'm like, maybe my mom or someone said some special prayer of some sort, but I just knew something was different, about me. I was just too young to, put it into words, to figure it out, to study. But I knew something was special, at that particular point when I studied with the Mormons. That's when it came clear to me that there's a special something. I didn't know to call it a calling. I just knew there was a special something.
That's powerful.
Yes, it is.
Ms. Katia Prince. But, what's so significant about it is here is a 9-year-old, 10-year-old young woman who's, if you want to look at it from a biblical text, in a synagogue with individuals who are in a false religion, idolizing their God. From Catholicism perspective, we know there are saints, statues and things of that nature. And this young girl prays to God from a sincere place, and God does not deliver. And then he used his same little girl to go back and say, this is fake. This is not real. This cannot be right. So at an early age, God is utilizing you and using your mouthpiece for the truth, which manifests itself where in our culture, being Haitian descent background, we are called rebellion, disobedient. But fast forwarding the tape, because here comes God again down the line in your story, where he's going to give you now the experience where you now can identify, here is a testimony of how God has revealed himself to you. So you want to elaborate where along the line where you have gone through something so dramatic without a support cast where God said, I am the only one that's going to be in the ship with you. Can you recall something in your life where you were alone, seek for the help, the signs, the guidance in God? Now you have come into the actual presence of God now, depending on only him.
My journey was so different that it wasn't one big thing. It wasn't some calamity that brought me to the knowledge of God, because, as you listen to my story, having migrated here, living with one family member, it didn't work out. Going to a second family member, it didn't work out. Ending up in, group homes and in the system. And I wasn't that deviant child. I didn't misbehave. It wasn't for any of those reasons. It was just a series of unfortunate circumstances. My father passing away, being kind of like stuck here in the States, being an orphan, and then going through the system and the system, if any of you are familiar with it, it definitely has a lot of challenges. And at that time too, I never thought anything of everything that was happening to me. I kind of took it in stride. I just kind of went with the flow. Then I ultimately, had my child. And I remember after I had her, remembering how my parents had raised me, my father, that is, going to school, going to Catholic school and giving me that spiritual component, along with the academic, component. I thought, I'm going to follow in the same footstep. And so I was looking, for God, because it was this need inside of me, to serve him. I didn't know the truth. I didn't know what. So I went to the Baptist church. I studied with the Jehovah's Witnesses. At some point in time, I had Jewish friends. So I wanted to know what Judaism was all about too. I was looking and I just couldn't find anything. So I just kind of went along with just life. and really didn't introduce my own child to any of the things that I know.
How old were you when you had your child?
I was 22 years old when I had her.
Okay.
And so I didn't do much of anything except for just taking her to church on Easter and dress her up, but I never gave her that knowledge. And what ultimately happened is when my child, turned 9 years old, she called me one day because she was in church with my foster mom. And of course, I wasn't going to church with them. She would spend weekends there while I, attended school. I was doing my graduate program at the time. And so one Sunday morning, I'm sleeping. I probably had gone partying, that night, as I did, in my youth, even though I had a child, whenever she'd be with her dad on, every other weekend, of course, I'd be out there living it up, partying, having fun, smoking, drinking, doing everything that everyone else does. And so that Sunday she called me, it must have been around 10, 11. And like I said, I was still in bed, probably from, a night of partying with my friends. And she called and she says, Mom, I want to get your permission to get baptized. Completely threw me off. I'm half asleep. I have no idea what the child is talking about. And I said, excuse me? She's like, Mom, I want to get baptized and I want your permission to get baptized. So my mind is racing and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, who's brainwashed my child? What is this baptism thing that she's talking about? And at that moment, I said, why do you want to get baptized? Because the first thing I wanted to say is, of course, I don't want to give you my permission. But there was something inside of me that's saying, Katia, if you tell this child she cannot get baptized, what could it hurt? You're going into the pits of hell yourself. So there was a certain reverence, a certain fear for God at that time that hit me. And I woke up, suddenly now wanting to know why she wanted to get baptized. I knew I'd raise her to think for herself, to be an analytical child. And so I said, why do you want to get baptized? I said, someone's talking you into it? She says, no, Mommy. She's like, I was taught the gospel and I don't want to go to hell. It's just that simple. And when she said that, it pierced me because at that moment, I realized that the education that I was supposed to be providing for my daughter, that I'd failed her in so many ways, that I myself was lost too. And it was at that time that I think, God probably took a hold of me because he probably knew he had to use her, to ultimately, bring me, because I was so in that mindset of wanting to be the best mom, the best everything. And that's just who I am. And here it is, was a major failure. Something as simple as God, I had never taught my child, and strangers now had taught her, and she's calling me to ask me if she could get baptized. I felt embarrassed. I felt as if I had failed not just God, but the child. And I looked at myself in a way that I had never looked at myself before, completely just disappointed that somehow, even the basics that were taught to me, that I hadn't taught it to her. I don't think I ever talked to her about God, a creator, Jesus, none of it. And I was just deeply ashamed. And that's when that change, started to take root. Because then I wanted to go and see, who those people were who were teaching my child what they had taught her. Although she told me no one pushed her, she didn't feel pressured. It wasn't under duress. I got all that, but I'm like, no, I want to go see what these people are all about, who my child is being around. I know my mom has to take her, on the weekends to help me out, but I don't know who my mom has these people, who my mom has my daughter around, but I'm going to go find out. And through going and finding out, sitting there, and of course I was still in my spirit because I'm like, no, I've been baptized. I know God, but I didn't know that I didn't know God. I didn't know what knowing God was all about. I had no idea, oh yeah, I believe in God. Like somehow that's a relationship with God. That means I'm going to go to heaven. I'm a good moral person. I don't need to be here every Saturday and Wednesday with these people. I don't need this. Are you crazy? I didn't commit any murder. Yeah, I do a little drinking, a little smoking. Everybody does a little something. We're not perfect. And I justified everything away because I was a good, moral, decent person. And moral, decent people don't go to hell. And as long as they love God and they know that and they don't commit the big sins, because the little sins are okay, the big sins, they're good. And like I said, it was just so foolish, just so silly. And it would take, gradually, getting to know God to just realize how foolish I was. But that's really when he grabbed a hold of me, was through that child. And talking to you guys right now, it's bringing this full circle for me in a way that I had never thought, because I'm thinking about the child that I was, when I myself, didn't know I had found God, but had already connected with God at the very, more or less the very same age that she did. So it's like, my mind is blown right now.
And that's what with Nick. And that's what this is what the podcast is all about, right, Adney?
Yeah.
The called by God to reflect and go back into remembrance of how your journey actually led to this very moment. What a powerful story.
You know what I like about just hearing your story, Sister Prince? I could hear God's sovereignty. Yeah. So, and what's so bad? There's a artist that said that he had to cancel his religion in order to gain his faith. Yeah. So, like, God has never forgotten about you. So, even though you was bombarded by so much religion and tradition, I look at it that you were still seeking. For God don't look on the outward appearance, but he look on the inside. So, it's like the scripture said, ask and it shall be given to you. Seek and you shall find, and knock and it shall be open to you. So, even though you were still seeking, but God used that very same thing, a child, your daughter that was close to you. And God could do things like that. Sometimes we're just so stuck in our ways. We're so religion and we're so stuck in our ways. And God said, okay, I'm going to use something that's close to you to draw you closer to me so you could unlearn and relearn about me. So what I want you to do, I want you to explain to our listeners. So, because I could hear surrender in there. That's that point when God is breaking you down, he's using your daughter. So I want to hear what that experience was like. When you finally submitted, you're like, okay, here am I. You got me, God. Like, what was that experience like?
It still took a while, honestly, because, everybody had these powerful, like, testimonies, like you mentioned, like you guys were like, asking me, what calamity, what hole, what situation did you find yourself in that God pulled you out of? Because that's typically, the stories, the standard story. And that wasn't my story. So at some point in time, it was like, is God calling me? What is this that I'm going through? Is this real? Does this even make sense? Am I God's, chosen? Who am I? And all of a sudden I realized that, my testimony was, as I mentioned to you guys, through all of these things that I went through, God kept me, he put people along the way. I didn't even know him at that time, but yet he had been working, through my life. So at some point in time when I sat down and I just started going back, and seeing, okay, what big thing happened, was my light about to get cut off and God delivered, when I was looking for that story that people have, I realized my entire life, from the time I came here with everything that transpired, he was watching over me. You can't imagine losing a parent, the one and only parent that you have, that's your mother and your father, and you're thrown into a system, you come from means, you come from having, domestics and servants, and you come to a place where people are telling you can't even go in the refrigerator, where you're being thrown from home to home, and you have no place of your own when, family has turned their back on you and you feel abandoned. And that doesn't break you. You kind of go through it and you survive. And, you somehow, all the statistics, that, you're supposed to be part of, you've overcame them. And you don't realize how big a thing that is, because you just I was just surviving, just going through, I was just surviving. And when I sat down, I realized, oh my God, God has been carrying me this entire time. Everything that I thought was working against me, being in the home, having to have a foster mom. The foster mom is the one who brought my kid to the knowledge of God, that brought me to the knowledge of God. Like, it's just all, intertwined all together. Like, God didn't start working on me at that point when my daughter said, Mom, I want to get baptized. He's been working on me. It's been working my story like this entire time. And I couldn't see it. I couldn't see that all of these years were my testimony, having survived that and not having to go through therapy and everything that people have to go through when they go through the things that I've gone through, that I somehow came out of it unscathed, to be honest with you. It's like, that's God. That's my testimony. That's what he had done for me. And it took me quite a while to realize that. This whole time, I was in the church and I believed, and, I was listening to everything that the pastors were saying, and I looked at the Bible. I'd never studied the Bible for myself before. There were things in there. It's like, how did I go to Catholic school when I never even knew the 66 books of the Bible? How? And so it was through getting to know him and developing that relationship that I realized that he called me a long time ago. And that scripture in Jeremiah about, God calling us, from we were in our mother's womb, like that rung so true for me.
Miss Prince, you can hear your sincerity, and you can hear the reflection. I have chills all over as of right now. And you talk about going back, and you can see how God is piecing the whole narrative together. He was always the one guiding you, leading you, protecting you, shielding you from hurt, harm, and danger. Your story is very significant in the sense of the children of Israel having to go from one captivity to another captivity into the hands in the land of the enemy. But God is sovereign, because, Jesus had to come and bring salvation to all mankind through a woman. Because he said, in order for you to relate to me, I have to come down on where you are, because we were not scooped down. We were refusing to be humble as such. So what he did to you, he said, in order for you to relate to him, he came through your own womb to use your own seed to communicate with you.
Amen.
So this is the type of God we serve. And that's why we've made a decision to say the Called by God podcast, because we're all are called. And Sister Adney, of course, another prominent, co-host on here, whose voice you haven't heard as much today because she's just soaking it all in. She can kind of relate. She can really relate to your story. And it seems very significantly true that most individuals are from the Caribbean are sent over to the U.S. for a better education, of course, opportunity of life, and their parents stay behind, sacrificing their lives and themselves to give their children a better opportunity. We have come to, me and Nick are very fortunate where our parents came over here in slave ships as well, but we were born in the States, where you two have been put on a ship to come here, or whether it be a plane or whatnot. But you can see that God's hand has never left your lives. And we can see that you're extremely emotional on today. I think we all are because your story is powerful.
I was listening to you, and when you were talking about how your daughter called you and asked you about getting baptized, I think that's one of those things, because you didn't know that you were searching for God, but God knew you were. So he used the most innocent thing in your life to say to you, you need me, I'm going to have to use this person to get you to understand how much you need me. So when Christine called you and asked you about getting baptized, and you had all these questions, and that calmness came over you and say, hold up, this is me. Like, what did that feel like, to feel that calmness come over you, and you like literally feeling God say, this is me calling you?
It caused me to get out of the bed, because initially when she called, I was laying down. And when she said what she said to me, and it all came kind of like full circle, how I had failed her and how I had failed myself and failed God and really had no relationship with God. I sat up, and all of a sudden my whole disposition changed. She had my full attention, and it was, both, what do I tell her at this point? This is an opportunity for me to be the parent and guide her. My dad had always taught me, through the way that he raised me and talked to me and reasoned with me, to talk it out and kind of pull it out and have this intellectual conversation, so that way he can get to the core of it and get me to really think about what it is that I'm about to do. And so at that moment, that's how I felt. But instead of my dad, it was just like, it was a different spirit, honestly. And I can't, all I can say at this point, at the time I didn't know it, that it was, the Spirit of God, telling me that I need to tell that child she's looking for that reassurance. She's looking for her mom to be her guide right now, even though she could have easily just done this thing. But still, the people who were there with her thought that it was important for her to reach out to me. And yet when she did, although she was asking me for permission, I felt that at that point, God was telling me, what are you going to do now? Because like I told you, my spirit was to say, no, what baptism? You don't need to get baptized. When you were a baby, we went to the church and your godmother held you and we prayed over you. We were good, but I just couldn't. It was just one of those things like, don't you dare, Katia, don't you dare. I had that. It was just something so strong within me. It's like, don't you dare. And all I could do was just, tell her, ask her why she wanted to do it. And in those simple words that she used, when she says, I've been taught the gospel and I don't want to go to hell. It was simple. I don't want to go to hell. And funny, as I'm talking to you guys today, and the reason why I was just so grateful for Sanat's prayer is because I just gotten off the phone with my daughter, hence the reason why I wasn't a little bit earlier talking to her, and we were having the same conversation about salvation, because she was telling me about how she's getting pulled in all of these different directions and talking to me about how Eve was in the first woman, about Lilith. And we were just literally having this conversation right before this phone call, similar to the same child who pulled me at the time to the knowledge of God. Literally before I had to get off the phone with her to let her know that I was having an interview with Brother Nixon. But this was the same conversation. And I'm telling you again, when I say my mind is blown, bringing this full circle, but the same level of attention that I just gave her when she called and was inquiring about, some of the books of the Bible that are not canonized, and the fact that she's learning so much. And I had to let her know she needed to quiet the voice and she needed to start being pulled into every different direction. And that no matter what she was learning, I said, what is important? I said, there's only one thing we need to know: who created us, why he created us, how we can be saved in eternity. I said, that's all that matters, the gospel. And so
this is good.
God,
this is good.
That's powerful.
I like
this is really good.
So
remind you, Mr. Nixon Sylvain could chime in as well. Let's think, because what you're saying is actually true. My daughter's in the same state right now as well. Being 19, second year of college, sophomore. So remind you, the same individual who was chief cherub in the kingdom, Lucifer, okay? It's the same person that is now rebelling against all mankind to destroy what God has created. So one have to be in a position, in a posture to understand, yes, historically our history is factual, but it's been perverted. It's been perverted. So once, I tell my daughter, she said the same thing. The books are written by man. It was to keep us in captivity, to minimize us, to make us feel less important and keep the other one superior. I said, what you need to do is realize that the root of the book is true. Love. There is a savior. We all come from the same kingdom, right? We all brothers and sisters, and there's eternity, which you said. But the only difference is it's been perverted. Division, different, background, ethnicity, race. That's the opposite of what was pure is now been, toxic. So it's a lie. It's a lie.
So what I want to ask you one last question. This was good. I want to ask you one last question. Obviously, Jesus came, God came and died for humanity. And I want to ask you, Sister Prince, in terms of your ministry, what do you want to be remembered for when you die?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
My love and kindness. Sometimes it's hard to tell people how much you just genuinely love them. because it's hard for people to accept that someone who doesn't know them, who's not blood related to them, who hasn't been their friend, it's hard for a stranger,
right,
to understand that I just love you. And I want the best for you. And if the world was mine to give you, I would put it at your feet. And it's so often that I feel that deep love for anybody that I come across. I'm not an emotional person, but yet, love is the one thing that I always try to make people know that I feel for them, regardless of how close they are to me or not to me, because I would do everything in my power to make their life better, to make their life easier, simpler. If I could take a task, off their hands, if I can give them a simple gift to let them know that they're cherished, if I could, do an act of service to let them know, I can help you in any way that I can. So love, I think probably would be it for me, because, so many people have shown me love in so many different ways. And somehow I think that's what just God put in me. That's why I like to serve people, because sometimes that's the only way I can show my love.
Amen. All right. Well, that's going to conclude our show. But I wanted you to, share with our listeners, where can they reach you? Because I'm sure somebody going to be like, that woman, she said some stuff. You was in tears. This was emotional. I felt the spirit, I felt the passion, through your words. So where can you be reached?
Yeah, the best means I would say to reach me would be by email, and then we can take it from there. My email address is, 2009.lmsl@gmail.com. For anything, reach out. And if we need to have, a conversation, by phone, by Zoom, Google Hangout, Facebook Messenger, whatever it may be, we could take it from there. But the conversation can be initiated, by email. That's the best means to get in contact with me. And I do check my email.
Hey, Sister Prince, also, I see you on Facebook. You be posting your little scriptures. So you sure you don't want to add that in there as well?
Absolutely. My last name is Prince, Prince. So I did a play on my last name. My Facebook moniker is Prince-SS Katia, Katia. So Princess Katia, that is my Facebook moniker. Certainly you can reach out to me through Facebook, and that means feel free to, reach out to me by Messenger as well, to operate it through Facebook.
All right, well, Sister Prince, there you have it. And again, Sister Prince, we thank you for joining the Call by God podcast. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening. And remember, if you want to support what we do, then subscribe, share, and leave a review on iTunes. And that's all for now. But I'll see you in the next episode. Be blessed. Wait, there's more. What if today was your last day on earth? Would you be ready to meet your Maker? Well, Jesus Christ has given us the good news. He told his disciples in Mark 16:15-16, and he said to them, "Go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. He who believes and is baptized will be saved, but he who does not believe will be condemned." Jesus Christ has instructed his children to share and preach the gospel, which is the good news, which means that Jesus Christ came and that he was sacrificed, he was buried, and he rose on the third day. By believing and by repenting and confessing and being baptized, you will be saved. So it is your choice. Jesus Christ will not force you. You've heard the message, you heard personal testimonies, but this is your opportunity to give your life to Christ. Don't wait until tomorrow, because tomorrow is not promised. So I hope you submit to the will of God and give your soul to Christ. Be blessed.